Most people think they know what happens to men who grow old alone: whispers of loneliness, shadows of regret, empty rooms echoing with silence. But what if that image is wrong? What if the man sitting quietly on his porch isn't mourning what he's lost, but savoring what he's gained? Freedom, peace, purpose. In a world obsessed with togetherness, we often overlook the strength it takes to stand contentedly alone. This is not a story of what's missing, it's a revelation of what's possible when a man chooses solitude and turns it into something extraordinary. Have you ever passed an older man sitting alone in a park, quietly reading or feeding birds, and wondered what stories lie behind that stillness? Society often whispers assumptions: lonely, forgotten, maybe even bitter. But what if those narratives miss the truth entirely? What if the man you saw was not mourning absence, but celebrating autonomy? Today, we're diving deep into the overlooked reality of older men who live alone, not because they were left behind, but because they chose to step forward into a life of independence. Forget the pitying glances or well-meaning concern. Many of these men are not victims of solitude, but architects of a deeply fulfilling lifestyle. In this video, we unpack 5 powerful truths about older men who live without a woman by their side. It's a conversation long overdue, because too often, we reduce aging to dependency and companionship to necessity. But the reality? It's far more textured. You'll learn why many of these men find strength, not sadness, in their solitude. We'll explore how they build rich social networks outside of romance, how they thrive in health and mindset, how they manage their finances and emotions with a quiet resilience the world rarely acknowledges. This isn't about statistics or cliches. It's about lives lived deliberately, so settle in. Because by the end of this journey, you might find that the path you feared most, living alone, is one of the most empowering choices anyone can make in later life. 1. Independence as identity. Many older men live alone by choice to preserve autonomy and control. Independence allows them to structure life on their terms, routines, preferences, and peace without compromise. This lifestyle fosters a positive self-image and mental well-being. Example: Tom, a 78-year-old, finds peace and freedom in living solo. Let's begin with the first and most misunderstood truth: independence. For many older men, living alone is not a consequence of loss or rejection, but a conscious, even celebratory, decision. Independence is not just about living without a partner, it's about living with agency. Picture Robert, 76, who spent a lifetime as a civil engineer solving structural problems. When he retired, his friends asked if he'd remarry after his wife passed a decade earlier. He smiled and said, "I've already built the structure I want to live in: peace, simplicity, and my own rhythm." Independence, for Robert and many like him, isn't just about physical space, it's about psychological territory. Being able to get up when you want, eat what you prefer, spend hours in a workshop or immersed in a book without having to explain or justify. It's not just comfort, it's identity. That's not to say compromise isn't valuable, but for some, reaching a stage where compromise is no longer a requirement feels like a long-awaited freedom. Society often sees this solitude and tries to label it as empty, but for these men, it's anything but. It's a form of sovereignty. There's a deep confidence in knowing your decisions, your routines, your priorities are entirely your own. And from that confidence grows contentment. Research backs this up. Studies show that older adults who maintain a sense of control over their daily routines exhibit lower stress levels and higher psychological resilience. And this goes beyond academic data. It's visible in the quiet pride of a man who arranges his bookshelf just so, who plans his day without checking with anyone else, who crafts a life that is wholly unapologetically his. This type of independence doesn't mean they've shut the world out. Rather, it means they've learned to curate it. They've become editors of their lives, removing the noise and keeping only what resonates. There's a story of a man named Elias, a 79-year-old former jazz pianist in Atlanta. He wakes up at 10, plays an hour of improv piano, walks to his favorite diner, chats with the owner who knows him by name, and returns home to paint in the afternoon. No one tells him what to do. No one intrudes. And he doesn't want for more. In his words, "This life I live is my last symphony, and I choose every note." Independence, when embraced with intention, becomes not just a lifestyle but a profound declaration: I am enough. I don't need to be completed. I am already whole. That's a message worth hearing more often. 2. Social connections beyond romance. Living alone doesn't equate to isolation. Older men often maintain deep friendships, participate in community activities, and stay connected through technology. These flexible social bonds offer emotional support without the complexities of romantic relationships. Example: Robert, 74, finds fulfillment in weekly card games and hikes with friends. Asterisk. Now let's talk about a truth that completely dismantles the stereotype of the isolated old man: social connection. It's tempting to assume that without a partner, older men must be lonely. But dig a little deeper and you'll find something surprising. Many of these men have created vibrant, supportive, and even joyful social ecosystems, just not the kind our culture typically glorifies. Instead of leaning on romantic relationships, they lean on something else: chosen connection. Take Harold, a 74-year-old retiree from Seattle. He's never remarried after his divorce, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a more connected man. Every Thursday, he hosts a board game night with friends he's known for 30 years. Sundays are for coffee with his sister. And during the week, he volunteers at a community garden where he's the go-to guy for tomato tips. His life isn't lonely, it's layered. The common mistake we make is thinking romantic relationships are the only meaningful relationships. But friendships, especially in later life, can be just as nourishing. In fact, many older men discover that without the emotional entanglements or expectations of romance, they're freer to connect authentically. These connections are often rooted in shared interests and mutual respect, rather than obligation. In psychology, we call this relational autonomy, the ability to engage socially while retaining full control over how, when, and with whom. And guess what? That autonomy reduces stress. It boosts self-esteem. It allows for relationships that uplift rather than deplete. Harold puts it simply: I don't need a partner to feel loved. I need people who see me. In fact, there's a growing body of research showing that men who cultivate friendships in older age tend to live longer, report higher happiness levels, and maintain better cognitive health. They're not just passing time, they're filling it with substance. And with today's technology, distance is no longer a barrier. Many older men use video calls, group chats, and online communities to stay connected to family or old friends who've moved away. For example, Jacob, a 70-year-old veteran living in Texas, talks to his granddaughter in London every Sunday via Zoom. He even hosts a monthly virtual chess tournament with other veterans. These digital bridges make social connection accessible in ways that weren't possible a generation ago. The takeaway? Older men who live alone aren't disconnected. They're often selectively, intentionally, beautifully connected. And that difference matters, because it's not about quantity. It's about quality, agency, and sincerity. And many of these men have mastered all three. 3. Health outcomes depend on lifestyle, not relationship status. Health among solo living older men varies widely, often depending on proactive self-care. Many adopt healthy habits like regular exercise, balanced diets, and mental wellness practices. Example: George, 79, stays fit and socially active, attending a senior center and swimming daily. Let's tackle one of the most persistent myths, that living alone as an older man inevitably leads to poor health. It's a belief wrapped in concern, but soaked in assumption, because the truth is, the health of older men living solo isn't dictated by their relationship status, but by their habits, mindset, and support systems. Sure, some face hurdles just like anyone else, but many take their solitude as a cue for responsibility, not resignation. In fact, living alone can act as a powerful motivator. With no partner to nudge them about doctor's appointments or daily meds, many men develop a strong internal drive to stay on top of their health. They build structured routines, walking in the mornings, preparing balanced meals, tracking medications, staying mentally active, and they don't do it because someone's watching. They do it because they've learned that no one else is coming to manage their well-being. That awareness builds discipline, which becomes a habit and eventually a lifestyle. Let's meet George, 79, a retired firefighter from Minneapolis. Every morning, rain or shine, he does a 30-minute walk around his neighborhood. At home, he makes his own meals, lean meats, vegetables, the occasional sweet treat, and keeps a whiteboard on the fridge, tracking his hydration, sleep, and steps. He told me once, "I don't have a wife to tell me to take care of myself, but that doesn't mean I don't care." Quite the opposite. He said he sees health as a form of self-respect. And that mindset? It's powerful. Because here's the kicker: autonomy often leads to engagement. When men live alone and still manage their well-being, it reinforces their sense of capability, that in turn feeds their mental health. And yes, social isolation can be a risk, but many combat it with community activities, hobby groups, or volunteer work that offer both interaction and purpose. George, for example, visits his local senior center every Wednesday. Not because he's lonely, but because he enjoys the company, the card games, and the trivia nights. This kind of proactive engagement shields against depression, supports cognitive function, and improves physical health. And with today's technology, older men are increasingly using smartwatches, fitness trackers, and health apps to monitor everything from heart rate to medication schedules. It's not just about staying alive, it's about thriving. Of course, challenges exist. Men without partners may struggle in emergencies or when managing chronic conditions. But many prepare, installing medical alert systems, maintaining close ties with neighbors, setting up emergency contacts. It's not that they're invincible, it's that they're intentional. So let's stop pretending that a man living alone is a ticking health time bomb. The reality is often far more inspiring. They're not deteriorating in silence. They're managing, adapting, and in many cases flourishing. 4. Financial independence and control. Financial autonomy empowers men to live according to their values without financial conflict from a partner. They manage budgets, plan for retirement, and make personal spending decisions freely. Example, Paul 72. Finds peace of mind in independently managing his money. Now let's talk about money, not in terms of wealth, but in terms of control. Financial independence is one of the most quietly powerful truths behind older men who choose to live alone. It's more than just paying bills or buying what they want. It's about owning the direction of their lives without compromise. When you manage your own finances in later life, you're not just surviving, you're steering. Consider Paul, a 72-year-old retired accountant from Denver. After decades of working with other people's spreadsheets, his greatest joy now isn't exotic travel or fancy gadgets. It's knowing exactly where every dollar of his retirement is going. His budgeting system is color-coded, his accounts balanced to the cent, and he tracks his grocery receipts with the same care he once gave Fortune 500 statements. He smiles when he talks about it, not because he's frugal, but because he's free. No debates over spending. No compromises about priorities. Just quiet, empowered ownership. And here's the thing, this autonomy builds emotional security. Men like Paul aren't trying to impress anyone. They're not pressured by joint decisions or financial expectations. That space allows them to make values-based choices. Some invest in hobbies, art classes, fishing trips, a new telescope. Others channel their funds into long-term plans, estate planning, trust funds for grandkids, or renovating a modest home to better suit their aging needs. And there's dignity in that. Managing your own financial future, especially in an age where stability can feel elusive, provides a sense of continuity and purpose. It's not always flashy, but it is solid. Of course, there's responsibility too. Living alone means you can't rely on a partner to split costs or step in during an emergency. That's why so many older men take proactive steps, maintaining strong savings, purchasing long-term care insurance, setting up automatic payments, and ensuring they have the right legal paperwork in place: wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives. These aren't just backup plans. They're reflections of a mindset. I may be alone, but I am not unprepared. And let's be honest, financial peace of mind goes a long way. It reduces anxiety, limits conflict, and creates room to enjoy life without the constant background noise of worry. Men who manage their own money often find they also manage their emotions better, because one of life's biggest stressors is no longer looming. So the next time someone wonders whether an older man living alone is getting by, consider this. He might not just be getting by, he might be thriving in a life where every financial decision affirms his freedom, his values, and his foresight. 5. Emotional resilience and self-awareness. Solo living often reflects emotional maturity and self-knowledge. Men learn to handle loneliness, setbacks, and stress through introspection and self-care. This fosters authenticity, confidence, and a sense of fulfillment. Example, Samuel, 77, describes solo life as a reconnection with his true self. And now we arrive at perhaps the most profound and least acknowledged truth: emotional resilience. This, more than any financial plan or fitness routine, is the heartbeat of the older man who chooses to live alone. Because this choice, this quiet, intentional path of solitude, is not made in ignorance of what it lacks. It's made in full awareness of what it offers. There's a certain gravity to aging solo. It asks you to meet your own emotions without distraction, to sit with discomfort, to celebrate victories that no one else might see. And from that process, something powerful emerges: self-awareness. Meet Samuel, a 77-year-old retired schoolteacher who's lived alone since his mid-60s. When asked if he ever feels lonely, he doesn't flinch. "Of course I do. But I also feel peaceful, free, and clear-minded, and I wouldn't trade those things for anything." That's the crux of emotional resilience. It's not the absence of hard feelings, but the ability to face them without collapsing. Samuel journals every morning. He meditates. He takes long walks without his phone and says it's where his best ideas still come from. He's built an emotional life that isn't dependent on external validation, and in doing so, he's become deeply in tune with himself. And he's not an exception. Many older men who live alone develop emotional coping strategies that younger generations could learn from. They engage in practices like mindfulness, creative hobbies, volunteering, or spiritual routines, not as distractions, but as expressions of self-connection. These men are often more emotionally honest because there's no one around to perform for, no one to convince they're fine. They either deal with what's inside or they don't survive it well, and most choose to deal. Emotional resilience also means accepting imperfection, letting go of the pressure to have everything figured out. Older solo men know that life doesn't hand out clarity in neat packages. Instead, they've learned to live with ambiguity, to find beauty in stillness, to weather sadness without letting it rot their joy. They've moved beyond the illusion of control and stepped into a deeper wisdom that peace doesn't come from having everything, but from knowing what you need and letting the rest fall away. It's a kind of quiet courage, the kind you don't notice in a crowd, but that becomes obvious when you talk to a man like Samuel for 5 minutes. You realize he's not broken or abandoned, he's whole. And he's chosen a life where every day becomes a mirror, not a mask. 6. Strong non-romantic social bonds. Re-emphasized. Men develop deep ties through hobbies, community roles, and family. Intergenerational involvement, like mentoring, adds purpose and joy. Example: Walter, 80, finds joy through gardening clubs and book discussions. Asterisk: as we've journeyed through independence, connection, health, money, and resilience, one more truth quietly rises to the surface, a truth that ties all the others together. It's about redefining what a meaningful life looks like when it doesn't follow the expected script. For older men who live alone, the measure of meaning often shifts. It becomes less about achievement or status and more about rhythm, presence, and legacy. Not the kind etched on tombstones, but the kind left in hearts, in quiet routines, in lives touched by small gestures. Take Walter, 80 years old, a retired engineer who lives in a modest house with a garden he tends like a cathedral. He says his greatest joys now are his weekly book club, mentoring teens through a local STEM program, and making his famous lemon bread for the neighbors each holiday. To the world, Walter might seem like just another elderly man with too much time. But if you step into his world, you see something else entirely. A life where every morning has a ritual, every task has purpose, every interaction is a chance to give. That's the secret many older men living alone have discovered. Meaning doesn't come from what you have. It comes from what you choose to value. And they value clarity, authenticity, freedom, contribution, even quiet joy. Many take on roles that offer purpose beyond themselves. Some mentor, some create, some serve. Not because anyone told them to, but because in solitude, they found not silence, but a signal. a call to become more intentional. And in that intentionality, their lives become more than just survival. They become examples. Examples that say, you don't need to be married to matter. You don't need to live with someone to live fully. You don't need a partner to have a powerful impact. There's dignity in solitude if you choose to fill it with meaning. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean these men are closed off to love or connection. Many would welcome companionship if it aligned with their values. But they're not waiting. They're not putting life on hold. They're not in between. They're in it, fully, presently, willingly. They've learned that fulfillment isn't found in being seen. It's found in seeing, in appreciating their days, their breath, their story, in giving without demand, and in becoming deeply, unapologetically themselves. So now, after peeling back the layers of solitude, what are we really left with? A sobering truth. Yes, but also a liberating one. Because to understand the lives of older men who live alone is to confront our deepest societal assumptions. Gently, intentionally dismantle them. We've been taught to pity them, to whisper about their empty homes, and assume their hearts must ache with regret. But more often than not, that narrative says more about us than it does about them. The truth is, many of these men have not fallen into solitude. They've stepped into it, willingly, wisely, sometimes even gratefully. They are not cautionary tales. They are quiet architects of lives that defy conventional norms and find power in presence, intention, and quiet joy. And if we're paying attention, there's a profound lesson in that for all of us. Maybe it's time we stop measuring the richness of life by whether someone shares a dinner table or has a wedding ring on their finger. Maybe the real question is, are they at peace with themselves? Are they living on purpose? Are they making their own meaning, even if no one else sees it? Because the older man who lives alone and smiles to himself as he sips his morning tea, who writes letters to his grandchildren or watches the birds from his porch, who volunteers on weekends or keeps his mind sharp with crosswords and classics, he is not lost. He is living a life that many fear and yet might one day envy. And it's not a life without challenges. It takes emotional muscle to navigate grief, to stay connected, to plan without a partner, to care for your own body, your own home, your own soul. But those who do it with grace leave behind more than a clean kitchen or a filled calendar. They leave behind an example. They remind us that wholeness doesn't always come in pairs, that some of the deepest fulfillment is found not in having someone, but in becoming someone. So if you're watching this as someone who lives alone, or worries they might one day, hear this: your life is not a placeholder. It is not waiting to begin. It is happening now. And it is worthy, complete, and deeply, profoundly yours. The truth about older men who live alone without a woman is not a tale of tragedy. It's a story of strength. One we should tell more often, with admiration, not pity. Because in their quiet, courageous way, these men teach us something essential. About aging, about independence, and about the human capacity to create a meaningful life, no matter who's in the room.